Let's discuss Sam Neill. This is another lecture. I am Professor Alexei.
And I am Priyanka.
Let's begin with a structural overview. Sam Neill is, to some extent, a paradigmatic case of an international screen career emerging from New Zealand, with continuous work from the early 1970s through the mid-2020s. It is worth noting his capacity for rapid modulation across genres and formats. We observe him as a scientist one year, a monarch the next, and a narrator the year after. In simpler terms, think of him as a multi-tool in a filmmaker's pocket. If the scene needs gravitas, erudition, mischief, or moral ambiguity, he could, as it were, click into the appropriate setting.
So, I guess we can start by thinking about the vocabulary we need. When we say filmography, that is just the list of works, right? But then there are terms like miniseries, cameo, and voice role. Can we connect those to specific examples here?
Indeed, to define terms, filmography is the comprehensive ledger of credits across film, television, and other media. A miniseries is a limited narrative told in a pre-planned small number of episodes. Merlin in 1998 is exemplary, where he led and earned both Emmy and Golden Globe nominations. And The Tudors in 2007, though a longer series, shows his prestige television standing. A cameo is a brief, self-aware appearance, often humorous. Consider his Odin actor turns in Thor Ragnarok in 2017 and Thor Love and Thunder in 2022. As for a voice role, we can infer two variants. Character voice, such as Alamir in Legend of the Guardians in 2010, or Tommy Brock in the Peter Rabbit films in 2018 and 2021, and narration, where his voice carries non-fiction storytelling. For example, New Zealand, Earth's Mythical Islands in 2016, which garnered him a Primetime Emmy nomination for Outstanding Narrator. Moving forward, why does this matter? First, his career amplified New Zealand's visibility within global cinema, not solely through a single franchise, but through a persistent presence in Australasian films, UK prestige television, and US studio features. Second, his cross-industry mobility, New Zealand, Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, effectively bridged production cultures. To elaborate, we see him as a recurring ambassadorial figure. His success at home and abroad established a durable pathway for subsequent New Zealand talent.
I think the next thing we should talk about is recognition. He had nominations across different places. Does that pattern tell us something about how consistently he was regarded?
Clearly. The written record notes career totals including 3 Golden Globes, 2 Primetime Emmy Awards, and a British Academy Television Award nomination, alongside major Australian honours such as AACTA and Logie recognition. The temporal spread of those nominations and wins across decades indicates not a single spike, but rather steady critical regard over time. Mathematically, the function is not a one-off impulse, but a sustained signal.
Building on that, can we do a few basic facts? 2 that stood out for me. First, he kept returning to the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World stories over almost 3 decades. Second, he was once credited as John Dermott for Shadow of China in 1989, which is unusual. Do we know why the credit was different?
As to the alias, the dataset documents the variation without assigning a cause, so we should refrain from conjecture. Regarding chronology, let's anchor a few points. Sleeping Dogs in 1977 functions as his feature breakthrough. Then, 1993 becomes a fulcrum year with Jurassic Park, which globalizes his profile, and The Piano, which underscores his depth in period drama. Subsequent returns to Dr. Alan Grant in 2001 and 2022 reaffirm that identification, while parallel work, Merlin in 1998, The Tudors in 2007, Peaky Blinders in 2013 to 2014, and later television like The 12 from 2022 to 2025 demonstrates range and continuity. Notably, in 2026, his death in Sydney at age 78 closes an almost 55-year screen trajectory, with post-production releases noted beyond that date. Before we get to the complexities, a brief personal note. It's important to understand that for some of us, the piano in 1993 exposed the cinema of New Zealand as a cultural bridge. The film's interplay of landscape, silence, and colonial tension argued, more persuasively than many essays, that images and sound can translate between histories and audiences. I can trace my own curiosity about film as transnational discourse to that viewing. This brings us to three framing questions. First, historically, how did Jurassic Park shape Sam Neill's career? Second, counterfactually, what if he had focused on directing? Third, openly, how might his roles influence future New Zealand actors? Let's start with the history. In 1993, Jurassic Park is not merely a successful film, it is a systemic shock to global popular culture. Cast within that shockwave, Neill's Dr. Alan Grant becomes a rational, quietly brave scientist whose skepticism yields to wonder. Importantly, he is neither a swaggering action lead nor a mere expositional device. He anchors the narrative's epistemic core. What do we know? What do we fear? And how do we learn? In so doing, he acquires a global identifier that audiences keep in working memory for decades.
I'm curious about the franchise question. Was he central to the identity of the series? Or could the films have kept going without him just fine?
To elaborate, the franchise has multiple pillars: dinosaurs, spectacle, scientific hubris. But Neill's Grant supplies a particular tone, empirical steadiness with humane restraint. His return in Jurassic Park 3 in 2001, and again in Jurassic World Dominion in 2022, creates a longitudinal thread of continuity, which the transmedia sphere extends through video games in 2015, 2018, and 2021, where he voices Dr. Grant. Functionally, this makes him a custodial presence. The brand can operate without him, but with him, it retains a credible memory of its original moral and scientific posture. Let's transition to another aspect, the counterfactual. In 1974, he wrote and directed the short film Phone, and later he wrote or produced select documentaries. Suppose he had emphasized directing from that point. We can infer a plausible migration toward authorial nonfiction, histories, travel, cultural memory, given later works like Why Anzac with Sam Neill in 2016, and his substantial documentary presence. Such a path might have reduced his availability for long-form acting in prestige television and major franchises. The opportunity cost would likely have been non-trivial.
What if we thought about it like this? If he had focused on directing, would we probably not have Merlin or The Tudors, or even the Peter Rabbit combination where he acts and does a voice? Would that duality have disappeared?
Yes, and the Peter Rabbit example is apt. In 2018, he appeared on screen as Mr. McGregor, and in the same project universe, voiced Tommy Brock, returning vocally in 2021. This illustrates multimodal participation that a directing-first pathway might have curtailed. One strength of his actual trajectory is elasticity, leading, supporting, cameo, voice, and narration across decades. In simpler terms, He did not exchange acting for authorship. He ran them in parallel, especially in documentary spaces, thereby widening rather than narrowing his cultural footprint. On to our next point, the open question. How do his roles influence future New Zealand actors? First, the template is geographic and modal. Start local, build regionally in Australia and the UK, engage globally in the US, and return home periodically with significant works. Hunt for the Wilder People in 2016 is a fine illustration. Second, his recurring authority figures, scientists, monarchs, statesmen, demonstrate that performers from a smaller market can credibly inhabit global institutions on screen.
So, yeah, moving on. Maybe the transmedia part matters too. By voicing Dr. Alan Grant in games, and doing those Marvel cameos, younger audiences meet him even if they skip, the earlier films. Can we say that this widens the pipeline for New Zealand talent by association?
Arguably, visibility compounds. When a New Zealand actor maintains presence across films, series, animation, and games, they implicitly advertise the viability of that career path to emerging peers and to gatekeepers. It is worth noting his documentary influence as well. New Zealand, Earth's Mythical Islands in 2016, The Pacific, In the Wake of Captain Cook with Sam Neill in 2018, and the 2024 narration T-Rex. These works model how an actor's voice can function as a scholarly instrument for public understanding. Further research could quantify the downstream effects on commissioning and casting practices in the region.
So, I guess that kind of sums it up. Sam Neill is a versatile New Zealand actor whose career spans decades, shifting between genres and mediums with, surprising ease.
To summarize, we pose 3 questions. Historically, Jurassic Park in 1993 anchored a global profile that he sustained through returns and voice extensions. Counterfactually, a director-first path was plausible, but would likely have contracted his acting canvas. And openly, his model suggests a repeatable transnational route for New Zealand performers, with documentaries and narration as undervalued vectors. For further study, examine New Zealand cinema's international linkages and the statistical patterns of cross-market careers in the Australasian, UK, US corridor.
Thank you for listening, and take care.
This concludes our lecture for today. Goodbye.